My name is Emily Carter, and for 7 years I've been married to Michael, a man defined by structure, discipline, and unwavering focus. He works long hours in corporate finance, leaving early in the morning and returning when the house is already wrapped in sleep. I used to find his dedication admirable. Lately, it feels like an invisible wall built brick by brick between us. Our conversations have been reduced to schedules, bills, and reminders, nothing more intimate than the occasional "did you eat?" or "don't forget your appointment tomorrow." I couldn't remember the last time he looked at me long enough to truly see me. That's where the conflict began, not with someone new entering my life, but with the quiet realization that my marriage had become a place I lived in, not a place I belonged. It was a brutally cold December night when our entire block lost power. The house plunged into darkness and silence, leaving me alone with nothing but my breath and the unsettling awareness that I didn't know what to do with stillness anymore. I sat wrapped in a blanket, listening to the wind scrape against the windows, when my phone lit up unexpectedly. It was Ethan Hale. He wasn't a stranger, he'd been one of Michael's closest friends at work. I'd met him a handful of times at barbecues and birthday gatherings. He was warm, quick-witted, and the kind of person who noticed small details without trying. And unlike my husband, Ethan always asked how I was as if the answer mattered. His message was simple. "Power's out on your street too? Just making sure you're okay." I stared at the screen longer than necessary before responding. "Yeah. Just dark and freezing." A minute later came another message. "I'm close by. Want me to drop off a lantern? I've got extras." It should have been an easy no. Michael would have said no instantly, he trusted independence more than he trusted people. But something about Ethan's offer felt different. Not intrusive. Not pitying. Just kind. So I typed a single word that changed everything. "Sure." 10 minutes later, he stood on my doorstep, snow dusting his jacket, warm light from the lantern reflecting in his eyes. When I opened the door, he gave a small, genuine smile, one that reached all the way to his gaze. "Thought you might need this," he said softly. And without thinking, without planning, without understanding the ripple that would follow, I stepped aside. And I let him in. Ethan stepped inside with a quiet caution, as if he understood something unspoken lived in the shadows of my house. I set the lantern on the kitchen table, and its soft glow stretched across the room, revealing more than just furniture. It revealed the emptiness I'd stopped noticing. He slipped off his gloves and scanned the dim space with a thoughtful look. "You doing okay?" he asked, and although his tone was casual, the question landed deeper than it should have. "I'm fine," I answered automatically, the way I answered most people. But as soon as I said the words, I saw the faint crease in his brow. He didn't believe me. Ethan was perceptive in a way that felt both comforting and dangerous. I moved to the stove to heat water for cocoa, grateful for something to do with my hands. Ethan leaned against the counter, his shoulders relaxing as if he'd been here before, though he hadn't. "Michael still out of town?" he asked. The question was simple, but the weight behind it wasn't. "Yeah," I said, stirring slowly. "He'll be back Sunday." "Long trip," he murmured. "Long month," I corrected. He didn't smile, didn't joke, didn't brush it aside the way most people would. Instead, he watched me with unsettling honesty. "You sound tired, Emily." It wasn't accusation. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. I set the spoon down, the clink echoing more loudly than expected. "I guess I am." He nodded, as if he'd known the answer long before I said it. "You don't have to pretend with me, you know." The gentleness in his voice made something inside me tighten. I didn't remember the last time someone had spoken to me that softly. We drank cocoa at the table, steam rising between us like a fragile veil. The flickering lantern light danced across Ethan's face, softening the edges of his usual confidence. He looked almost vulnerable. "You ever feel like you're living on autopilot?" I asked before I could stop myself. The question startled him, but only for a second. "Every day," he admitted quietly. "But I didn't think you did." His honesty disarmed me. "I used to think I was fine," I said. Then I realized I was just drifting. "And Michael?" he asked carefully. I hesitated. "He's good. He's responsible. He's just not here." "Not really." Ethan exhaled slowly, his eyes softening. Emily, you deserve someone who notices you. For one suspended moment, neither of us moved. The truth in his words cut through me, sharper than I expected. And yet, I didn't pull back. I didn't correct him. I didn't defend my marriage. Because I couldn't. The storm outside howled, rattling the windows as if urging me to choose a direction. Ethan glanced toward the noise, then back at me, his expression unreadable. Should I head out? He asked quietly, though he didn't stand. I didn't answer, not for several seconds. Because the question wasn't really about the storm. It was about us. And neither of us knew the right answer. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face, the quiet warmth when he looked at me, the understanding in his voice, the way he leaned forward like he genuinely cared about every word I said. It was such a small thing, but it made something inside me shift. And that terrified me. By morning, my kitchen felt colder than usual. The coffee tasted bitter, and Mark's footsteps sounded heavier as he walked around the house getting ready for work. He didn't notice my silence. Or maybe he did and chose not to ask. Lately, ignoring things had become his way of keeping the peace. When he finally left, the house fell into a quiet that felt too big for me. I tried focusing on my emails, my deadlines, my never-ending to-do list, but the memory of Ethan's voice kept slipping in, unsettling everything I tried to hold together. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Ethan, hope you're having a decent morning. Also, I found the missing report file. Want me to send it? I should have ignored the message. I should have sent a simple thanks. Instead, my fingers moved before I could stop them. Morning's fine. And yes, send it. Also, thanks again for yesterday. I didn't know I needed that talk. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Returned. Ethan, anytime. And for what it's worth, you deserve someone who actually listens. My heart shouldn't have reacted the way it did. But it did, a small, warm jolt that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in months. I put my phone down, walked to the living room window, and looked out at the street. Everything looked painfully normal, cars passing, neighbors walking their dogs, sunlight settling across the lawns. But inside me, nothing felt normal at all. Later that afternoon, I ran into Ethan in the hallway at work. I wasn't expecting to see him, and the quickness of my heartbeat betrayed me. He stopped when he saw me, his expression softening like he'd been waiting for this moment. You okay? He asked quietly. Yes. Just tired. It was the safest lie I could offer. Ethan didn't press. He simply stepped a little closer, lowering his voice. If you ever need a break from pretending you're fine, I'm around. His words hit deeper than they should have. I nodded, unable to hold his gaze for long. It felt dangerous how easily he read the things I kept buried. As I walked away, I told myself to create distance, to protect what was left of my marriage, to keep my heart in the safe place it belonged. But another part of me whispered something else, something I wasn't ready to admit. I wasn't sure I wanted the distance. And that realization changed everything. The shift happened on a Wednesday, quietly, subtly, the way most dangerous things begin. I had stayed late at the office, trying to finish a quarterly summary that should have taken me an hour but had stretched into 3 because my mind kept circling the same questions. Why do I feel drawn to him? Why now? What am I missing at home? The building had emptied out, leaving only the soft hum of the heating vents and the distant thud of someone closing a door. My eyes were burning from staring at spreadsheets when I finally leaned back, exhausted. That's when Ethan knocked lightly on the open doorway. You're still here? He asked. His voice carried that mix of concern and quiet amusement that always seemed to find its way under my skin. I forced a smile. Just trying to finish this before my brain melts. He walked in, placed a takeaway cup beside my keyboard, and shrugged like it wasn't a thoughtful gesture. Vanilla latte. The place downstairs was closing, and I figured you haven't eaten since noon. I blinked, surprised not by the coffee, but by the fact that he knew my order. How did you? You mentioned it once, he said, settling casually against the edge of my desk. Months ago. I remember things. His words landed like a warm weight on my chest. Mark hadn't remembered my favorite coffee in years. I should have thanked him and returned to my work. Instead, I let the moment stretch, filling the silence with a soft, tired exhale. "Rough day?" he asked, tilting his head just enough to make me feel seen again. I nodded. "Everything just feels heavy lately." He didn't offer clichés or dismissive comfort. He simply studied my expression, and in his eyes I saw something profoundly inconvenient understanding. The kind that feels intimate even when nothing inappropriate is said. "Maybe," he said gently, "you're carrying more than you should." A part of me tightened. "What makes you think that?" "Because you always look like you're trying to be strong for everyone. And that kind of strength gets lonely." His honesty disarmed me more than any flirtation could have. My fingers curled around the warm cup he'd brought, grounding me as I tried to find the right words. "You shouldn't say things like that," I whispered. It wasn't a reprimand. It was a warning to him, to myself, to the fragile balance I was clinging to. Ethan's expression softened. "Then tell me not to care." I froze, because I couldn't. Not without lying. Not without betraying the truth growing between us like a secret neither of us had asked for. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed and he stepped back. The moment broke, but the tension didn't. It lingered in the air, pulsing lightly between us. "I should get going," I said, grabbing my bag. He nodded, but his eyes followed me to the door, quiet and unreadable. That night, driving home under the orange glow of streetlights, I knew something irreversible had happened, nothing physical, nothing spoken aloud, but real all the same. And it scared me how little I wanted to stop it. The next few days unfolded with an uncomfortable predictability. I kept telling myself that nothing had changed, that Ethan was simply a coworker, that I was simply tired, that my marriage was merely going through a phase. But lies, even the small ones, have sharp edges. They carve their shape slowly, quietly, until you realize they've cut deeper than you ever intended. By Friday morning, I was already on edge. Mark and I had barely exchanged more than a handful of strained sentences all week. He was preoccupied with work. I was preoccupied with pretending everything was fine. We'd become two people sharing a home, not a life. When I stepped into the office, I tried to avoid looking for Ethan. I didn't want to acknowledge how aware I'd become of his presence, how my pulse reacted when I sensed him nearby, how the air felt different when he walked into a room. Attraction had never felt so dangerous. I made it until noon before fate got involved. During a department meeting, our team lead announced that we'd be restructuring some projects. A new partnership meant tighter deadlines and more collaboration between departments. "Which means," she said, scanning her folder, "Ethan and Claire, you'll be co-leading the integration on the analytics side." My stomach tightened. I saw Ethan's head lift across the table, his eyes meeting mine with a calm, steady certainty that made my pulse skip. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. His gaze alone felt like acknowledgement of the tension, of the closeness, of everything brewing beneath the surface. After the meeting, I tried to slip out, but Ethan caught up with me in the hallway. "Looks like we're partners for the next few weeks," he said lightly, a trace of warmth in his voice. I forced composure. "Yeah. Should be fine." He studied me, the way he always seemed to, noticing too much. "If it makes you uncomfortable, just tell me." There it was again. His gentleness. His awareness. His ability to offer space without creating distance. "It doesn't," I said quietly, surprising myself with the honesty. "It's just complicated." He nodded, falling into step beside me. "We'll keep it simple then. Professional. Clean. No assumptions." I wanted to believe him. But the way he walked beside me, casual, steady, just close enough to feel the warmth of his presence, made simple feel impossible. Later that afternoon, we met in a small conference room to outline our first steps. The space was too small, the table too narrow, and every time our hands brushed while passing documents, something inside me tightened. At one point, Ethan paused mid-sentence, looking directly at me. "You seem somewhere else today. You okay?" I opened my mouth to deflect, but the truth slipped out instead. "I'm afraid of where this is going." For a beat, silence stretched between us. Ethan leaned back slowly, exhaling. Then we go where you want. Nowhere more. It was a promise. A line drawn gently, respectfully. A line I wasn't sure I had the strength to keep. That weekend, the house felt unusually quiet. Mark was out of town again, attending a conference in Chicago, leaving me alone with the steady hum of the heating system and the lingering sense that something was shifting inside me. I couldn't shake it, the memory of Ethan's gaze, his voice, the unspoken weight that seemed to follow me everywhere now. I tried to busy myself with chores, emails, and errands, but my phone kept vibrating with messages I didn't want to ignore. Each ping from Ethan felt like both a lifeline and a warning. I was drawn to him in a way that scared me, and the thrill of it made me feel guilty, alive, and confused all at once. Ethan, coffee break? I'm just outside your building. I stared at the screen, heart racing. A normal interaction would have been a simple maybe tomorrow or an ignored text. But the thought of seeing him, even briefly, made my chest ache with anticipation I didn't fully understand. I grabbed my coat, forcing myself to move mechanically through the cold, crisp air until I saw him waiting on the sidewalk. The city lights reflected off his hair, and he smiled that same warm, effortless smile that made everything else blur. You came, he said simply. I needed to, I admitted, though I wasn't sure why. We walked to a nearby cafe, the air between us heavy with unspoken truths. I ordered a latte, careful not to let my voice tremble. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying me with that same quiet intensity that made it impossible to hide. You're different this week, he said. More distracted. I'm just tired, I murmured, knowing it wasn't entirely true. Emily, he said, leaning forward slightly, we can keep this professional. Or, we can be honest. I swallowed hard. His words felt like a blade cutting through the protective walls I'd built around myself. I wanted to stay safe. I wanted to preserve the life I knew. But I also wanted to let myself be seen, really seen, in a way I hadn't been in years. I'm scared, I admitted finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Scared of what this means. Scared of losing control. Ethan reached across the table, resting his hand near mine, close enough to feel the warmth but careful not to cross the invisible boundary. Then we take it one step at a time. Nothing more than what you can handle. I nodded, heart pounding. The honesty in his words was intoxicating. The safety he offered, even in this precarious situation, made me feel like I could breathe again. As we left the cafe, side by side in the chill night air, I realized something undeniable. I had already crossed a line, not physically, but emotionally. And no matter how careful we were, the path we were on would change everything. The streetlights flickered above, shadows stretching long and uncertain across the pavement. I wanted to step back. I wanted to run. But a part of me whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was exactly where I was meant to be. And for the first time in years, I felt alive. Monday arrived with a dull weight pressing on my chest. The weekend had left me restless, replaying every glance, every word, every subtle brush of Ethan's hand. Work felt suffocating, the office fluorescent lights harsher than usual, the hum of the computers louder. Even the familiar walls seemed smaller, tighter, as if the tension inside me had manifested into the air around me. I arrived early, hoping to settle into my routine and ignore the inevitable, the looming presence of Ethan across the office. But I didn't have to wait long. He appeared near the entrance, casual as always, yet there was an intensity in his gaze that immediately unsettled me. It was the same look he'd given me since that first night, but now it carried a new weight, as though he sensed the boundaries we both struggled to maintain were weakening. Morning, he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth that both comforted and unnerved me. Morning, I replied, forcing my tone neutral. But my pulse betrayed me. We walked to the conference room together for a brief team briefing, and every step beside him felt electric. Small touches, elbows brushing, papers exchanged, felt magnified, sending shivers of awareness through me. I chastised myself silently. This is harmless. Professional. Stay in control. Yet control had been slipping through my fingers for weeks, and I wasn't sure how to catch it again. After the meeting, we lingered in the hallway, ostensibly discussing project details, though the conversation had already turned personal in the subtle, unspoken ways only he could navigate. You seem Distracted, he observed, tilting his head slightly. Everything okay? I hesitated, the truth gnawing at my chest. I don't know, I admitted finally. I feel like I'm drifting, and I can't seem to stop. His expression softened, concern evident but restrained. You're not alone, he said. I can see it. I don't need words to understand. The honesty in his voice made my heart ache. I wanted to protest, to tell him that this was wrong, that I should focus on my marriage, that I should step back before this became something impossible to untangle. But the words refused to come. Emily, he continued, voice low, deliberate, there's nothing wrong with needing to be seen. To be understood. You deserve that, more than you know. I looked away, the air between us charged with an intensity one couldn't name. He had become the mirror for all my unspoken fears and desires, reflecting parts of me I'd long ignored. I need to focus, I said finally, breaking the spell of proximity, even as my body protested. Of course, he murmured, his eyes lingering on mine a second too long, and I felt the sharp pull of anticipation, the undeniable truth that neither of us could pretend this would remain harmless forever. As I walked back to my desk, my heart racing, I realized that the line between professional and personal had blurred completely. Something was coming, something unavoidable, and I wasn't ready for it, yet part of me secretly wanted it to arrive. The moment lingered like a storm waiting to break. By midweek, the tension between Ethan and me had become a quiet, pulsing presence I couldn't ignore. It wasn't in the words we said, but in the spaces between them, the lingering glances, the subtle shifts when we were near each other, the unspoken awareness that both of us knew the danger of proximity. That afternoon, I found myself lingering in the office break room longer than necessary, pretending to organize supplies, hoping to delay returning to my desk where every glance at Ethan would set my chest on fire. He entered quietly, carrying 2 mugs of coffee, and for a moment, we simply stood there, acknowledging each other without speaking. You've been avoiding me, he said finally, his tone almost teasing but edged with concern. I haven't, I protested too quickly. The lie tasted bitter. I've just been busy. He tilted his head, reading my expression with uncanny precision. Emily, he said softly, I see you. All of you. Even the parts you hide. I wanted to look away. I wanted to retreat. But his words felt like a magnet pulling me forward, closer to truths I wasn't ready to admit. You shouldn't, I whispered. This isn't right. He stepped closer, though still careful to respect the fragile boundary between us. I know, he admitted. But right now, this is real. And you can't ignore it, can you? My hands tightened around my coffee mug. My mind screamed for logic, for reason, for a way to step back before things became unmanageable. Yet my heart betrayed me, fluttering in ways I hadn't felt in years. The loneliness I had buried beneath routines and obligations was rising like a tide, and Ethan was the first presence that made me feel alive again. I'm married, I said finally, the words trembling. I shouldn't. I can't feel this way. He didn't argue, didn't push, didn't attempt to exploit the confession. Instead, he nodded, as though honoring the honesty in my voice. I'm not asking you to make a decision now, he said gently. I just want you to know you're not invisible. And you never have been. The simplicity of his statement hit harder than any dramatic gesture could have. It was undeniable. True. And dangerous. I sipped my coffee, staring down into the swirling liquid as if the answer I sought might appear there. The room around us felt smaller, tighter, and charged with a tension neither of us could fully release. I can't, I began again, faltering. I don't know what this means for me. For him. For us. Ethan exhaled slowly, his gaze unwavering. Then let's take it one moment at a time. Just be honest with yourself, Emily. That's all I ask. I nodded, but the trembling in my chest betrayed the truth. I already knew I couldn't stop what had begun. As he left the room, the silence felt heavier than the words exchanged. I sank into the nearest chair, heart pounding, realizing that the emotional boundary I had built around myself had been breached. And for the first time, I understood that the line between desire and danger had blurred completely. Outside, the city hummed, oblivious to the storm building inside me. And deep down, I knew this storm would change everything. It happened on Thursday evening, the kind of evening that seemed ordinary until it wasn't. Michael was traveling again, leaving the house silent except for the hum of the heater and the occasional creak of settling floorboards. I had just finished tidying the living room when my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. Ethan, can we talk? Just us, for a moment. I hesitated, knowing that agreeing would cross the fragile boundary I had fought to maintain, yet unable to ignore the pull in my chest. I need to know what I feel, I told myself. I can't keep pretending. When he arrived, snow clinging to his coat and eyes reflecting the streetlights, the weight between us was palpable. He didn't rush toward me, didn't speak first. He simply stood there, letting the moment stretch like a taut wire ready to snap. I've been trying to figure this out, he said finally, his voice low and deliberate. I can't stop thinking about you. About us. About what this could be. I swallowed hard, the truth clawing its way up my throat. I feel it too, I admitted, almost whispering, almost afraid to breathe. His eyes softened, but there was a tension there, a recognition that what we felt was both undeniable and dangerous. Emily, he said, taking a tentative step closer, I don't want to pressure you. But I can't pretend it doesn't exist anymore. I care about you. More than I should. And I can't ignore it. I looked down, trying to steady my racing heart. Every nerve in my body screamed with anticipation, fear, and a longing I didn't understand until now. Ethan. I can't, I whispered. I have a life, a marriage. I don't want to hurt anyone. He nodded slowly, the weight of his own restraint evident. I know. And I don't want to hurt anyone either. But hiding this, pretending it doesn't matter, is breaking me. Breaking us. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The silence was heavy with unspoken admissions, with every conversation, every glance, every accidental touch that had led to this point. And then, impossibly, he reached out, not to touch me, not to push the line, but to offer a steady presence. Whatever happens, he said softly, I need you to know you're not invisible. You never have been. And even if this ends here, even if we walk away, that doesn't change the truth of what's real between us. The honesty of his words hit harder than any kiss, any confession could have. I felt tears prick my eyes, not from guilt, but from the intensity of being seen. Being understood. I realized then, standing in my quiet living room, that the line between loyalty and desire had dissolved entirely. The choices I had made, letting him in, letting myself feel, letting my heart notice what it had ignored for so long, had already set the course for everything that would follow. The storm outside seemed to echo the one inside me, the wind rattling the windows, the snow piling quietly against the porch. And in that moment, I knew, with unshakable certainty, that nothing would ever be the same again. Because some truths, once acknowledged, can never be undone. The days that followed felt surreal, like walking through a dream I couldn't fully control. Michael returned from his trip as if nothing had shifted, carrying the familiar routines and empty smiles that had become a background hum in my life. I tried to meet him where he was, to step into the comfortable roles I'd played for years, but the truth I had acknowledged with Ethan had changed everything inside me. I noticed the small things now, the way Michael barely touched his coffee before leaving for work, the distant gaze he carried when he thought no one was looking, the way our conversations remained tethered to obligations instead of connection. It was all familiar, yet everything felt hollow. And then there was Ethan. Every message, every brief glance across a conference room, carried a weight I couldn't ignore. I realized that my heart had shifted toward someone who saw me, not the routines, the responsibilities, the exterior, but me. The parts one had buried, the feelings I had convinced myself didn't matter, the longing for recognition and warmth. One evening, after Michael had gone to bed, I sat in the quiet of the living room, holding a cup of tea and staring at the empty space across from me. Ethan's words echoed in my mind, "You're not invisible. You never have been." The truth of them, the clarity of them, was a mirror I couldn't unsee. I thought about the choices I had made, the small steps that had led me to this moment. Letting him in, allowing my heart to notice, speaking truths I had long hidden, it all felt inevitable now, though at the time it had been terrifying. I realized that life was a series of decisions, and some of them changed everything, whether we were ready or not. I thought about forgiveness, about compassion, about the line between duty and desire. Could I forgive myself for noticing what I shouldn't have? Could I forgive Michael for the distance that had allowed this to happen? Could I navigate the complexity without losing myself completely? The house was silent except for the soft hum of the heater, a reminder that life carried on even in moments of upheaval. I breathed deeply, letting the quiet fill me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a fragile sense of clarity. I didn't have answers for the future. I didn't know how the threads of loyalty, love, and longing would untangle. But I understood something essential: I couldn't ignore my own heart anymore. And as I sipped my tea, watching the city lights shimmer through the window, I allowed myself a quiet acknowledgement of what had begun and what might come. Life had shifted, irrevocably, and I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't control, but something I could witness, fully and honestly. Some doors, once opened, changed the room forever. And though the path ahead was uncertain, I knew that facing it honestly was the only way to truly be alive.